What's up, everybody? Loft Sports Podcast. We're back. Brian and Tom. Tom, what's going on, man?
So Friday, I had a nice day off today. Saw a movie with the niece and nephews. The weather's nice as well. I don't have much to complain about at all, man. NFL
That's
draft
good.
is close too, right? Like it feels like it's close.
We are very, very close, and it's nice that it's the weekend. I'm in a very good mood. Maybe not as good a mood as Connor Griffin with the Pirates. I don't know if you just saw
I
that
did.
news today. So he's like the number one prospect in baseball. So the
Yeah.
Pirates called him up today, dude. They signed him to a new contract before he even took an at bat.
Do I want
Nine
to look at the
years,
numbers?
9 years, $140 million.
How old is he?
He's, what is he, 19, I think?
God
Crazy,
bless.
dude. Absolutely
God bless.
crazy.
To
And
be
in
that
and
level of
in
athlete.
and in his first at bat today, he doubled. He drove in a run.
Did
So
he?
now I'm just like, wow, I guess we got to put him in the Hall of Fame after one RBI.
Money
So
well spent.
yeah, that's right. Hey, it came through for at least one at bat. But yeah, folks, all right. So tonight we're going to bring you episode 5 of our draft series. So we'll be discussing the top offensive linemen in the upcoming NFL draft. As we've been doing so far in our series, right, we'll go through the strengths, weaknesses, maybe do some player comps, and we'll go through which players might fit on specific teams. So before we do a deep dive, Tom, through your evaluations of the offensive line, anything overall regarding this class in general that maybe you've noticed in your evaluations?
I think it's a deep class of guys, but I don't know if there's like a firm blue chip top caliber tackle. And I think what we're starting to learn in this class is if you're looking for blue chip guys, there just might not be a lot of them. We'll talk about some of the defensive guys who potentially could be blue chip guys. But on the offensive side of the ball, like every week, I feel like you're asking me, hey, is there a guy who could be top 5, top 10 in their position group? I think the only one I feel really solid about is Jeremiah Love. And I think this carries on to tackles and interior linemen, whether it be guards or centers as well. That's not to say, excuse me, that there won't be starters in this year's class. I think we're going to talk about 7 tackles today, potentially, all of which I think at some point will be starting tackles in the NFL, whether it's next year or the year after. But I pulled up last year's draft just to kind of look how does last year's class stack up to this year's. We had 3 guys go in the top 10, and Will Campbell went to the Patriots, Armin Membu went to the Jets, and Kelvin Banks, who went to the Saints. And then I kind of went back and looked at my notes to see where I had guys. Now, I never got to Campbell last year, but he probably would have been a top 10 player. Where in my top 10, I don't know. I had Kelvin Banks 4th on my big board. I really liked Kelvin Banks. I thought he was a really good player in college, and he had a really, really good year last year. And then I had Membu and Donovan Jackson. Where are they here? Like just outside of the top 10. I had them as offensive guard tackle combos. Jackson played guard this year for the Vikings, and Membu, he was predominantly a tackle for the Jets, right?
He played right tackle all year. Yeah.
Yeah, and both were pretty good, serviceable linemen this year or last year for their teams. I look at this year's group of linemen and I go, we're going to talk about Mauigoa and Fano, and they're probably the first 2 names. And the more I look at this draft and the more I read stuff and read the people who are a little bit more locked in than you and I are, it just feels like these are 2 guys who might drop outside of the top 10.
Mm.
Right now I have Mauigoa as my top tackle at, where is he? He's 10 on my list. So we're talking about last year, 3 tackles went in the top 10. Where did Jackson go? If I can find him quick. I mean, Tyler Booker went 12. Gary Zabel went 18. I mean, that's however many linemen, 5 linemen that went in the top 20.
Mm-hmm.
I would be shocked if we're at that number this year. So it kind of speaks towards maybe readiness of what we have this year. While I think there are good players who are going to be starters, I don't know how many of them are going to be locked in day 1 starters for their football teams.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, based on what I've seen as well. Right? I mean, we have teams early in the top 5 that could easily draft one of these tackles up there, but there's other mock drafts that I've seen and other people that I've seen either on, in the Twitter sphere, we'll say, that some of these tackles aren't going to like middle of the first round, which is pretty rare overall. Like you just mentioned, kind of like what we've typically have seen in past years. But yeah, so let's get into it. Let's break these guys down, and we'll give our overall thoughts as we tackle each one of these guys. So let's start with who you just mentioned, Francis Mauigoa, right? So he's an offensive tackle out of the University of Miami, 6'6", 315 pounds coming off his junior season, spent all 3 seasons at Miami, which is kind of a rarity these days with the transfer portal.
Yeah.
He started as a freshman at right tackle in 2023, and his performance actually earned him freshman All-American honors from multiple outlets. So his presence on the Miami O-line really helped improve their pass protection and the interior run game as he helped Miami get to a national championship game this past year. Of course, they fell to Indiana. And like we kind of just mentioned, he could be a potential top 10 pick. It sounds like he's going to be a first rounder, but not necessarily at the top of the first round. So, in breaking down Mauigoa, strengths, weaknesses, is there a current tackle you could possibly compare him to right now in the league? And do you believe that right? I mean, he was a right tackle. Could he make that switch to left tackle in the NFL?
Yeah, so Mauigoa played guard and played a little bit of guard and tackle throughout his career at Miami. I think that position flex is gonna be valuable, and you're gonna hear me talk about that with a number of these guys, how many of them could potentially kick inside the guard. Mauigoa is going to be a tackle, but he can kick in at guard, and it might be something teams look to do depending on who your 2 tackles are. As a blocker, I think once he gets his hands on rushers, he engages with them, he shows really good blocking technique, gets his hands in the right position, shows good balance, good footwork once he gets engaged. When he does get his hands on players, he can drive them back. He can move them. He's very powerful. And you mentioned him as a run blocker. That's where he's best now. He's really, really powerful as a run blocker now, and he's probably a better run blocker than he is pass blocker. Does a really good job at creating holes in the run game, moving defenders, whether sealing them off or just physically driving them backwards. Has good hand technique. Usually gets them inside of the shoulder pads. Does have issues with getting a bit of a wide grip at times, just needs to become more consistent with his hand placement. Shows good balance, good footwork for a player's size. Hardly gets knocked off the spot or caught reaching. He can overextend at times. That's when his balance is impacted. Needs to be more comfortable with his spacing. When he's a bit more patient as a blocker and he lets these guys try to get to him, his footwork can get thrown off, his balance can get thrown off. He moves and slides very well for a player his size. He gets off the ball fine. I'd like to see him be a bit quicker. Can struggle with guys who get to the edge quickly. So those super twitchy edge guys can give him trouble just because of how he doesn't really fire out of his stance. Isn't as effective if being asked to move or pull or slide. He can get to the second level, but gets lost at times. So that's why I think for him being able to start as a guard, I think teams would feel way more comfortable with him being a tackle. But again, that's something NFL teams can correct in terms of him getting to the second level and having an idea of where to go and who to block. Played right tackle exclusively at Miami. I do wonder how he transitioned as a left tackle. Definitely more ready as a run blocker versus a pass blocker, but only gave up 3 sacks in his final 2 seasons. Did have several penalties over his career, 21 in 3 seasons, 7 in 2025. So that just is always a concern when we're talking linemen. Again, I talked about his hand placement and stuff like that. And he especially in the college football playoffs looked good, blocking some of the guys he went up against. In terms of NFL comps, I mean, again, like you're gonna hear me bring up like multiple guys. Like there's Darnell Wright from the Chicago Bears. There are people who think he reminds them of Jermaine Illuminor from the Giants, where like it might take him a little while before he's a consistent starter. And even then, are you happy with that being your maybe ceiling? But I've seen people compare him to Joel Benito from the Browns, and if you got that, you'd be happy with that as well. So, I mean, I think when we watch him and Fanu, they're 1A, 1B. I think Mauigoa is likely going to be a day one starter, but it's not without some issues. If he shows up in training camp and you can really help him with the quickness and the getting off the ball, I think if he can just get off the snap a little bit quicker, that's going to help him in a lot of his balanced footwork stuff, dealing with these quicker guys off the edge. And if he can correct that stuff, he's pretty solid. If you're a run first team, though, you're going to love this guy. He's going to be able to come in day one and at least contribute in that side of the football game.
Yeah, I echo what you're saying here. Yeah, from everything I was reading about Mauigoa too, run blocking is definitely his, at this point, at least in his career, would be considered his specialty. Some of the team fits that I had for him, I had the Arizona Cardinals at pick number 3, right? Arizona There's not really much on that offensive line right now. At left tackle, they do have Paris Johnson Jr. So Mauigoa, if they were to draft him, saying number 3, he could slide right into that right tackle spot. You have your basically your 2 bookend tackles there for Arizona, right, playing right in front of, I guess, Jacoby Brissett this season, and then, depending on if they make a move later in the draft for a quarterback, or make a move for a quarterback in next year's class, you have your bookend tackles there for maybe the next 5, 6 years at least. So I think he would fit in really well with Arizona. It's funny you mentioned Jermaine Illuminor, because I had the Giants here as a potential fit too at number 5. Um, right, they have Andrew Thomas on the left side, Luminor on the right. I don't know, maybe if they're as sold on a Luminor, but Mauigoa maybe could be a guy that they could pop in there if they wanted. I mean, I think the Giants really need to focus on getting more protection for Jackson Dart. So maybe Mauigoa, maybe not the perfect fit. I actually think the guy we're going to speak to next actually might be even a better fit. But then
Probably.
let's get to the Cleveland Browns. Pick number 6, right? The Browns have made this whole offseason has been so far about rebuilding their offensive line. At right tackle, they did trade for Titus Howard from the Texans, but they brought in guys like Tevin Jenkins, Elgton Jenkins. They don't have that left tackle yet right now. So if they were to draft Maui Noah at 6, Maui Noah maybe would have to transition to that left tackle role. If the Browns feel like he can do that, maybe he would be the pick at 6. I got the Dolphins here at number 11. Not really much there with the Dolphins. They have Austin Jackson currently at right tackle. Patrick Paul looks like he's going to be slated in as the left tackle right there. So maybe Miami, though. I mean, Austin Jackson does have some experience on the left side. Maybe they draft Maui Noah, put him at right tackle, move Austin Jackson to left tackle going forward to put in front of Malik Willis for this upcoming year. And then the last team I had in here was the Rams. And I was thinking, you know what? The Rams offensive line was pretty good last year. I know they like Alaric Jackson. They like a couple guys on that offensive line, but I mean, you can draft a guy like Maui Noah, put him in front of Matthew Stafford, and I think that would be a really good spot for him to pop into the Sean McVay offense.
I think Dallas, if he gets to 12, could be an option too. I know it sounds
Really? You
I
you
know
so
it
you
sounds
take him
crazy.
maybe
I
go
just
ahead.
think if Mauigoa or Fano are there at 12, it probably means a lot of the defensive guys that Dallas is keying in on are gone. And now I just think it's a matter of, are you going to reach on a defensive guy, or are you going to take a guy that's probably higher on your board? I think if he doesn't go to Arizona at 3, or he doesn't go to Cleveland at 6, this is a guy who likely falls out of the top 10. There's definitely a scenario where one of these teams in the top 10, has him rated just higher than we expect, and maybe he gets to a Washington or New Orleans at 7 or 8, or Kansas City, or who knows, one of those teams, and they just go, we have him as like our third best player. He's the best player available. We have to take him. If that's not the case, then I think once we start getting towards Miami, Dallas, Los Angeles, with the Rams, we're talking about a player who I would venture to guess, if he's not top 10, he's really close to the top 10 for these teams. And it's just a matter of, do you want to take the best player available who can help your football team now? I mean, Dallas has Terrence Steele at right tackle, but I think they would be willing to upgrade in that position if he was there. Or would you reach for a guy that you might have at 17, 18, 19 on your board because it's a positional need? Maybe Dallas wouldn't. Maybe they draft a guy with need. But if Mauigoa is here at 12 or 11, it tells you a lot of the defensive guys that teams are looking at, they went. All the edge rushers, all the corners, down, Styles. And if Dallas gets wiped out of those guys, there's a scenario where they're looking at the 2 tackles, or Draw McCoy, who still might go, but maybe McCoy coming off the knee injury, and they just go, we feel more comfortable with the tackle. So I could see Dallas potentially taking him at 12 too. Or I could see Cincinnati, Miami, Dallas, the Rams trading out of this pick for one of these teams in the back half of the 20s or high teens that go, we had a top 10 grade on this guy and he's there. It's worth trading up for.
Mhm. Yeah, maybe a team like maybe San Francisco, team like that, maybe trades up. So it's a large jump going from 27 to maybe like 10, but if they feel like if they feel like it's worth giving up a lot to move up there and get that guy, then that'll make sense. And so as a Cowboys fan, then what's your concern on the offensive line right now? If you're thinking Maui Noah maybe at like 12, is it considered like a big need basically?
I would say it's the biggest need on the offensive side of the football right now. It's not. It's probably not the third most important position Dallas needs to upgrade, but Terrence Steele has been average at best the last 2 to 3 years, and their offensive line has been pretty good. Your right tackle, you have a little bit of a question mark at. Your left tackle, you might have a question mark at, depending on how Tyler Guyton improves. Like for me, it's always a matter of just strengthening a strength. And if it's not a strength, then you're adding something that can make it a strength, right? So from Dallas's perspective, if you're still not sold on Guyton and you're not sold on Steele, it can't hurt to bring a tackle in if you have them graded high enough. Dallas might not have any of these guys graded in the top 15, and it might not matter. But if you do, it can't hurt to take one of these guys and then let him compete with the three that you have. You're only going to make your offensive line better if Mauigoa is better than any of these guys. And to be honest with you, I think he'd give Terrence Steele, he'd probably give Guyton a chance, a push at left tackle too, but I just think they're going to give Guyton another chance. He was a former first-round pick 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and Steele's an older guy whose contract is coming up either in this upcoming season or next year. You draft Mauigoa if you can start at right tackle. Now all of a sudden you have a piece in Terrence Steele that's on a 1-year deal. That's not too bad. You could look to flip him for a draft pick in the future, or just keep him as like a swing tackle type thing. I just think it's an option there. Now so I'll just say this to Mauigoa, and we'll talk about it with Fano and Monroe Freeling, who's been mentioned, because these tackles are, I'll say, close enough. There might be a team like the Niners that are just like, you know what? These guys in the back half of the draft, we're okay taking them because they're as much of a project as these guys at the top half.
Mm-hmm.
But that's how I feel, like how close some of these guys feel with one another. Very similar to the wide receivers too, right? Like we've seen it with the wide receivers now too. Like, is Cardinal Tate going to drop? Is Makai Lemon going to drop? Is there a world where these guys get to 11, 12, 13 and you're asking yourself, well, why? They're really good. Well, the guys behind them may not be as far behind as what we think, especially with the way some of these pro scouts are looking at it.
All right, let's get to the second guy on our list here. So Spencer Fano. So he's a redshirt junior out of Utah, 6'6", 311 pounds. Played all 3 seasons at Utah, just like Mauigoa playing all 3 seasons at Miami. So in 2025, Fano won the Outland Trophy and was named a unanimous All-American after allowing 0 sacks and only 5 pressures this past season. So phenomenal season for him at Utah. Then at the Combine, ran a 4.9 140. Look, I don't really put a lot of stock into offensive linemen running the 40, but still really impressive showing. Shows he's a pretty good athlete. So the big thing about him is that, right, there's a major debate about his arm length. So his arms measured at 32 and an eighth inches, which, right, technically that puts him at the bottom 2% for NFL tackles for how they're currently measured out. Though his pro day arms measured at 32 and 7/8, so apparently his arms grew a little bit. Don't ask me how that works. I don't know. And here's a fun fact about him. He has a lot of family members that have played in the NFL. So he's actually had some uncles. His cousin actually currently plays for the Broncos. So there's a bloodline there in terms of NFL caliber athletes, at least making it into the league. So Tom, looking at Spencer Fano, strengths, weaknesses, if you have a comparison, and then do you think based on the arm length, or maybe not even based on the arm length, maybe if teams maybe see him as a guard, do you think he could succeed as a tackle just as much as maybe he could succeed as a guard at the NFL level?
Yeah, Spencer Fanu started as a freshman. He's been a starter ever since. 3 years of starting experience. As a blocker, he's a physical blocker. Once he gets his hands on you, he moves you and he wins. Moves really well for a guy his size. I mean, that showcased at the Combine. I think he's the most athletic offensive lineman, guard, tackle, center in this draft. He can pull or get to the second level. Was asked to do a lot in terms of how he moved and where he blocked. He worked out as a guard at the Combine. I don't know if he did at his pro day. I meant to look that up, didn't get to it. But he definitely is trying to show teams that there's position flex there. He did struggle to locate blockers or who to block once he got to that second level. But again, like Mauigoa and a lot of guys we're going to talk about in this draft, I think that's easily correctable. Shows good technique as a blocker, hands inside of the shoulder pads, great balance once he gets engaged. In the run game, he does a really good job moving linemen, does a really good job of using rushers' over-aggressiveness against them. Guys who fly off the edge on run plays, he just seals them off and lets them go, and then he's off finding the next guy. Once engaged, he does a really good job controlling the battle. Doesn't really get driven, doesn't really get moved, gets engaged as a strong center of balance. It's impressive. I think he can improve his get off a little bit. He makes up for it with how fluid he can move once the ball is snapped, but again, not the quickest once he gets off of the snap. He's good, not great strength. I'd like to see him get stronger. He can get driven back, and while he re-anchors and keeps the rusher away from the quarterback, excuse me, I still have concerns about these guys who, when I flip on the college film, are so easily driven back. We know guys in the NFL are going to be a little bit more powerful and a little bit stronger. So I'd just like to see him get a bit stronger and anchor a little quicker off of the snap instead of getting driven back and then re-anchoring. His matchup against David Bailey showed him at his best, but also showed what he needs to work on. With the quicker rushers, he can get caught flat-footed, and him playing catch-up. That definitely impacts his hands and how he reacts to things. But there were plenty of times with Bailey that Fano gets his hands on Bailey first and wins the matchup. 0 sacks, 5 pressures in 2025, but did have 5 penalties. He's a projected first-round pick. Again, I think he could go anywhere from 3 to 20. I think he can be a starting guard in the NFL. Teams will likely try him at tackle first. It's where he has his experience. But again, if you're a team that you really like what you see with him, you might look at him and go, we'll play him at guard the first 2 to 3 years, figure out whatever we have going on at tackle. Maybe you have a guy that you're still not sure about, but you're happy with, you spent a high draft capital on, or an older guy who might retire, his contract's coming up and you're not going to extend him. Well, you can draft Fano and then let that guy walk or not extend him, or he retires, and then Fano can kick out the tackle. My 2 NFL comps are Elijah Vera Tucker, who's had a career kind of like that, right? Was a tackle, played guard, has had success as a guard, or Charles Cross, who's been, a good caliber starting NFL tackle. Like Mauigoa, I think there's a world where Fanu steps in as a day one starter and he's good, really solid, steady. I think there's a world where he steps in and there's warts and he struggles a little bit. But all the guys in this draft, I think him and Mauigoa are the 2 most ready to start at tackle. And if you want to draft Fanu and play him at guard, I think he can do it.
Yeah, I would think, especially if you draft Fano early in the first round, these teams, I think expectations would be that he would start right away. And like you said, I mean, if there's some warts early, they'll probably just have to, these teams will probably just have to eat it and deal with it for the time being. Hopefully he'd be surrounded though on a decent offensive line. Unfortunately for some of my team fits here, that might not be the case. So again, I'll echo some of the same teams that I said for Maui Noah for Fano. So Arizona Cardinals, right? Again, this could be a guard or tackle position. Like I said, outside of Paris Johnson Jr., not really too much on that offensive line to get excited about. Now, here's a pick, the Giants, right, at 5. So the Giants have Jermaine Illuminor at right tackle. They have Andrew Thomas at left tackle. So what I'm thinking the Giants should do is give Jackson Dart as much in front of him, whether it's weapons, whether it's the offensive line, as much with him to succeed at the NFL level. And I think if you draft Spencer Fano, you know what? They actually do have a spot open right now at the right guard position, right? Greg Van Roten's a free agent. I don't think they're going to bring him back. You can slot Fano in at right guard, put him next to Illuminor and John Michael Schmitz in the center there. And I mean, you're kind of set there on the offensive line. It's a pretty solid offensive line from left to right there. Cleveland, again, another team. Like I said, I mean, they have left tackles, like basically their one need right now on that offensive line that they haven't really put anybody in that spot right now. Miami, again, I'll echo them. Miami, of course, needs players. The Rams. One team I'll also look at here as far as guard goes, the Baltimore Ravens. So at 14, like, let's not forget, right? So their interior is a little weakened right now, right? But they did just lose Tyler Linderbaum to the Raiders for the biggest contract for an interior offensive lineman in NFL history. So their interior of the offensive line, they did bring back John Simpson during free agency, but I don't think it might not be where they're as comfortable with that current development there, right? Surrounding Lamar Jackson with an offensive line. So maybe Fano at one of those guard positions could make sense for Baltimore. And then I have at 17 here, I have the Detroit Lions. The Lions, from what I've read, they're kind of been sniffing around the offensive line draft picks at the recent combines and at some of the recent pro days. I think the Lions are definitely locked in to go offensive lineman with their first round pick. And if Fano is still on the board, or maybe they like him enough to move up, Detroit, I think, would be an obvious fit for him with their current predicament.
Yeah, I think the Giants scenario that you threw out there, and I'll go on record now. I don't think the Giants do it, although I think it's a sound strategy that you're throwing out there. I think it would make a world of sense. That is the type of scenario I'm kind of talking about, right? Illuminor's 31. They just signed a 3-year deal. They can get out of that contract. I just looked it up. In 2 years. So you draft Fanu, play him at guard. If he plays well enough for you, and Illuminor plays well enough, well, then you have 3 years of Fanu and Illuminor on that right side. It gives you more than enough time to evaluate whether Fanu can be your tackle, you're comfortable with it, or he's just a really good guard, which is still great. And if he plays well enough and Illuminor struggles, they have an out in the contract in 2 years. You can move on from Illuminor and kick Fanu out there. That would make a ton of sense.
Mhm.
I don't think the Giants are going to do it. Again, if he goes before Mauigoa, which is a very real scenario, my feeling and my thought is he goes because that team feels that he can play guard. And that position flex is more valuable to them than just Mauigoa as a starting tackle.
All right, let's get to the third guy on our list here. This is our first guard of the draft, one guard who's expected to go in the first round. Here I go to pronounce this name. Olavavega Ioane, known by Vega to his close friends and
And we're
associates.
going to be calling him Vega when we do this recap.
We will be calling him Vega a lot. By the way, Tom, that reminds me. Do you remember Savio Vega from the
I do.
90s wrestling? That made me think when I heard
WWF.
the nickname originally, I'm like, oh, Savio Vega, look at that. So,
Good theme song.
yeah, it wasn't bad, right? And he had the nice, what was it? The Los Boricuas. Remember that? They were the group.
Yeah. What a time.
Dude, we might have to start like a 90s wrestling pod on occasion. Just talk about
Hey,
that.
if the viewers want that, I am in. Give me some 95 Shawn Michaels, baby, my hero.
There you go. Start rewatching some old episodes of Raw or even Nitro or something. So Vega, right? So he spent 4 seasons at Penn State, redshirted majority of his freshman season, only got in some work during his freshman year. As a redshirt freshman in 23, he earned all Big Ten honors. And then in 24, as a full-time starter, he was named second team All Big Ten. In 25, he was a first team All Big Ten and first team All American. He allowed 0 sacks and only 3 pressures all season. I've seen draft projections for him. Looks like he's going to be like a middle first round pick. So speaking of Vega, so his strengths, weaknesses, if you have a player comp, and what your outlook is for him.
Yeah, again, a multi-year starter at Penn State, lined up in different areas within that offensive line. He will be a guard in the NFL, but he showed enough position flex that you can do different stuff with him on the line, depending on your scheme or downage or whatever the situation is. He did a lot of different stuff for Penn State. He lined up at tackle, off tackle, depending on what the situation was. So that's something that teams can utilize him for. He's athletic as a guard, asked to move a lot while blocking, pulling or getting to the second level. I do think he can get lost at times when he gets past that line. But again, that can be coached up and improved on. And when he does get his hands on guys, he buries them, especially linebackers, especially safeties, corners, anybody in the second level when he's getting down line and blocking people when he's pulling. When he gets that head of steam, he crushes guys. He isn't the quickest off the ball. This impacts his run blocking a lot. It forces him to play catch up. It impacts his technique. Also impacts his balance. He ends up on the ground way too much for me when watching him on film. It's something he has to work on. Just that balance went off the initial stat, whether it's footwork, whether it's hand technique, whatever it is, he needs to kind of become a bit more consistent with it. Looks better as a pass blocker, shows good footwork, slides well across the line. Again, has good technique when guys are coming at him off the snap, shows good hand placement. And really when he gets engaged with guys, he doesn't really lose a lot as a pass blocker. Needs to get a bit stronger when dealing with the more explosive defensive tackles, can get knocked back a bit, re-anchors well. But again, it's kind of a similar issues to the guys we've talked about, that when we're dealing with guys in the NFL, they're a bit more powerful, a bit more explosive. If you get blown off the ball right off the snap, you might not have the time to play catch up. So I'd like to see him just improve either his strength or anchor a little sooner. Don't give way so much off the snap. But he didn't allow a sack his final 2 years at Penn State, and he only had 2 penalties in the first 4 seasons at Penn State. He's a projected mid-first, early second, although Finn's going to have a bunch of team fits for you. I'm going to tell you exactly where I think he will go range-wise. two NFL comps. I think the high end stuff is Kevin Zeitler, where he comes in and he's a really impactful guard for years to come. I think at worst he's a Cooper Beebe type who's on the Cowboys right now, where he's the starting center for Dallas. I don't think he'll be a center, but I think he shows very similar to what Beebe is, which is a really steady football player, solid in the pass block, good as a run blocker, and still improving. I mean, he's been a starting center for the Cowboys since they drafted him. I think at worst, Vega is a starting guard for you with his warts the first year or two.
All right, so let's talk about team fits for Vega. So originally I was thinking the Saints. The Saints have used a lot of first round draft capital though the past couple of years, right? You mentioned a guy like Kelvin Banks earlier. He was a first round pick. Talise Fuaga, he was another first round pick from a few years ago. They still have Eric McCoy. They have guys like Cesar Ruiz, so they might be set on the offensive line. But he's a guy, and again, actually, they signed David Edwards in free agency. But if they really wanted to just load up and build that wall around Tyler Shuck, I mean, they could go with Vega here. Another team need, I'm going to mention them again, the Baltimore Ravens. The interior, right, took that hit from losing Linderbaum. The interior is what they might look to build up on with this pick in the draft at number 14. I'll mention the Lions again. The Lions have gone through a complete offensive line overhaul themselves, so they might want to add a reinforcement like Vega to one of their guard spots. The Pittsburgh Steelers are another one for me. They're Pittsburgh's at picking at number 21, and they did lose a free agent this year. They lost a free agent to the Arizona Cardinals, Isaac Samala, who was a long-term guard for them. So Vega maybe could slip right into that left guard position right there on the Steelers, probably playing in front of Aaron Rodgers this upcoming season. And then another team I had in here was the Chargers, who were picking at pick number 22. I mean, we saw firsthand how poorly their offensive line was this past year. You're right, during that playoff game against the Patriots. So I think Vega here would be a first day starter for the Chargers. You could slide him right in there. And again, like you said, there might be warts right away, but he's surrounded by some pretty good tackles on those lines in Slater and Joe Alt. So those are my fits for our guy Vega.
I think his range is between 14 and 22. And you named a bunch of teams in there, whether it's the Ravens. I did a mock the other day for friends. We did a 2-round mock. I am going to Tampa at 15. I don't see him making it through that little gauntlet, in part because we're not going to talk about other guards in depth. We'll name a couple others, but there probably won't be another guard in the first round. You might be drafting Fanu as a guard, or maybe Proctor as a guard, who we'll talk about in a little bit. But Vega is the only guy who's really a guard first. So because of that, I think one of those teams that has a need in that little murderer's row are going to take him. And I think it really could be the Ravens, the Bucks, the Lions, the Panthers, maybe the Steelers. They definitely could use some interior help work. And if not, if he gets the Chargers, I think the Chargers would take him very quickly.
All right, let's go to the next lineman on our list here. So Monroe Freeling out of Georgia, 6'7", 315 pounds, coming off his junior season. Spent 3 seasons at Georgia. What have you noticed from these offensive linemen, folks? They've all stayed at one college. So as a freshman in 23, Freeling played in 8 games as a reserve and saw most of his action as a swing tackle. But in 24, he played every game, started the final 4 games at left tackle. And then in 25, he became the full-time starter at left tackle and was a second-team All-American SEC selection. And he helped anchor an offensive line that allowed the fewest sacks in the SEC. So at the combine, right, we're talking combine again, he posted a 9.99 relative athletic score. So that's the formula that defines him as like a high-end athlete, so to speak. So, and that was actually the second highest score ever recorded for an offensive tackle since 1987. And this included running the 40 in 4.93 seconds. Again, I don't put a lot of stock at linemen running the 40, but still, it's impressive. So the projections that I've seen for him seems to be he could be an early first-round pick, it could be a mid-first-round pick, maybe even a late. We'll see. I mean, it seems like there's a lot of variance with him based on the type of athlete that he's shown to be. So Monroe Freeling, strengths, weaknesses, and your outlook for him.
So I'm pretty sure I said if Spencer Fanu might be the most athletic. If I didn't, that's what I meant to say, because this kid would rival him. Became a full-time starter in 2025, started 4 games in 24. He has great size, and he moves incredibly well for a player of his size. There's a play with Ole Miss where Ole Miss gets the Georgia gets to the second level, and he's running with Ole Miss corners. It's like absurd how athletic he looks. He slides and kicks out at a very high level because it's just easy for him. Looks like he can get lost once he gets to the second level, but again, can be coached up. Very comfortable combo blocking, chipping, and then getting to the second level. Understands who to block and when to pass off blocks in terms of pass blocking. Struggles with hand technique to me a lot. When he does engage, he holds up well and shows he can do it at the level needed to be an NFL tackle. But he's very, very inconsistent. When he gets them in the right place, he's fine. But there are too many times where just his hands are just not where they need to be. He gets too wide of a grip, and this impacts his balance, causes him to get driven back. He has the strength to be a starting tackle, but it all starts with the fundamentals for him, and they're just not there yet for him. He likes to strike off the snap. When he does it well, he's really effective. When he misses, it absolutely blows up any chance he has at blocking. It leads to bad hand placement. He can get him outside of the shoulder pad. I don't think I have it written down here somewhere. I don't know how much or how little he got flagged, but there were a number of plays he could get flagged, and they're the type of plays that you'll get in an NFL game. He just needs to be more consistent with his blocking technique. He has the athletic ability and even the intelligence as a blocker to do much of what is needed. Despite the concerns about the technique, he only gave up 1 sack and 5 pressures last year. It was 2 penalties and 14 starts. But there are also concerns about his lack of starts, very similar to quarterbacks. He's only started a handful of games at the college level. I think he has probably the highest ceiling of any lineman in this draft because of how athletic he is. If you can make him a polished blocker or just improve his technique, it's kind of sky's the limits for him because of how natural everything else comes for him. Um, I it, I think he could go anywhere from pick 5 to pick 32. I don't think the back end of the first is likely, and I would not be shocked if this guy's the first lineman taken because he's a traits guy. You cannot teach what he shows on film athletically. My NFL comp for him is Broderick Jones. Broderick Jones was a very similar athlete when you watched him on film, and they had very similar concerns as well coming out. So yeah, Broderick Jones for the NFL comp.
Yeah, based on his what he was able to accomplish as just at the not just at the combine, but also on an athletic level, playing in games too during the college season. You can see the type of athlete that this kid is. And yeah, that's why I included as a team fit for me Cleveland at number
Yeah,
6.
that
You
would
know,
not shock me at all if he
Mhm.
went
And
6
he
to Cleveland.
and he's only played left tackle at the college level, right? Did he play right at all, or was it only left? I think from what I saw, he only played left, and if he did only play left, it makes sense because Cleveland still needs a left tackle, which they don't really have on their roster right
I'm
now.
assuming it was left. I'll look it up as you're talking.
Another team that'll echo, and actually I should point out, Cleveland's picking at 6. Cleveland also has a first round pick at 24 in case this guy does slide. But based on how we're speaking right now, I don't think either of us really expect that to happen with him. The Dolphins again at pick number 11, they could use a left tackle. Patrick Paul's their left tackle right now. And he was a second round pick from a couple years ago, but they might want to upgrade that. The Lions again at 17, they have a hole right now at left tackle themselves. They might have to move up to get him maybe, to get Freeling, but the Lions do have a big hole at left tackle. They could fill that with Freeling. Another team here, I have the Philadelphia Eagles here, just because I feel like, right, Lane Johnson retirement rumors, do you draft a guy like Monroe Freeling? At pick number 23, he could sit for a little while. That would be okay in that spot and play as like a swing tackle for his rookie season. Then if Lane Johnson is going to retire after the 2026 season, he would slide right into that right tackle position. Even though, right, we mentioned I think he's only played at left tackle as Tom looks that
Yeah,
up.
yeah, yeah. Left tackle, yes.
Left tackle only. Okay, so it would be a transition. Maybe if the Eagles feel highly about him, right? I mean, being as a great athlete as he is, maybe he can transition over to right tackle, and maybe he could be the guy to step in when Lane Johnson retires. And then the 49ers I have here at pick number 27. Is this your straight up replacement for Trent Williams after next season. I just saw some news, I think it was this week about, they had there's kind of like a little minor contract dispute, it seems like, with Trent Williams and the 49ers. So, maybe the 49ers might be thinking ahead, maybe a season ahead here. If they draft a guy like Freeling, he could basically be, like a swing tackle in that regard this year. Maybe start on the right side. I'm not sure who their right tackle is right now, but that he could be a guy that slides in once Trent Williams, maybe if his time comes to an end after the 2026 season.
This will be a guy that probably goes way higher than Finn and I expect because there are a lot of NFL teams and NFL scouts that based off traits, and his traits are probably the best of any lineman in this draft. So, yeah, we're talking about this guy in the 20s. I'm not going to be shocked when he goes in the mid teens, maybe even in the top 10 picks in the NFL draft. I base a lot of this stuff off tape, and I don't love his tape. But you cannot doubt that the traits that he displays are just at that type of level. So it'll be interesting to see what he does and how he translates to the NFL.
All right, next guy on our list, Caden Proctor from Alabama. So he's 6'7", listed at 352 pounds, coming off his junior season. So he had an interesting college path here. So he's originally from Des Moines, Iowa, and he was the #1 tackle in the 2023 class. And initially he committed to the University of Iowa, but last minute he flipped to play at Alabama, for Nick Saban. He wanted to play for Saban. So he started at left tackle as a true freshman, and finished the year as an all SEC freshman. And then, right, so Nick Saban retires. Proctor decides to transfer back to Iowa in early 2024. But 2 months later, he changes his mind and he transfers back to Alabama before even playing a snap there. So he's from Iowa. He might be the most hated man in Des Moines. I don't know. His junior year, right, he transformed basically into a superstar on that Bama offensive line. He won the SEC Jacobs Blocking Trophy, which goes to the top lineman in the SEC. He was a consensus first-team All-American. He only allowed 1 sack in over 500 pass blocking snaps. From everything I've seen, it's looking like he's projected as a mid-first round pick. So speaking of Proctor, Tom, strengths, weaknesses, and your outlook for him.
Yeah, came in as a highly touted recruit, was a starter from his freshman year, and then continued to start from there. Great size and strength, moves well for his size, isn't an elite athlete, so doesn't have pretty much what the three guys we talked about before him in terms of tackles have. And technique is good for the most part. When he gets engaged, he shows the power and balance needed to be a consistent NFL blocker. Really controls the battle, controls rushers really well when he gets his hands on them. There are times he can get too wide of a grip outside of the shoulder pads that impacts him. Doesn't show it a lot, but it does flare up from time to time. But for the most part, he gets his hands in the right position. And because of this, he wins more times than he loses. He has great strength, especially as a run blocker. When he can get engaged and drive guys forward, he buries them really, really strong as a run blocker. Can get driven back at times. Again, re-anchors well and keeps the quarterback upright. But this is a guy that should not get driven off the line like he does. So I don't know if it's an initial anchor issue, just trying to hold that ground, or if he's a bit lazy at times. I don't know, but that's something he just can't allow for the size and strength that he has. Can struggle with identifying and picking up blitzers and stunters. Again, something that can be worked on and will need to be worked on. Can be slow off the snap and out of his stance, but he does kick out well and beats guys to the spots more time than not. That this can cause him to play catch up at times, which leads to reaching and grabbing. It could be an issue against really explosive, quick twitch guys. At worst, he shows everything you want for him to be an NFL guard. The best case scenario is he'll be a tackle. There's been plenty of talk about what his best position is. He, in my opinion, will be a guy, again, talking about that mock I did the other day with some friends. I picked him to the Steelers, and the Steelers are kind of set at tackle, but he can play. I think he can start as a guard right now. So you draft him, you let him play inside, and then figure out if he's a long-term tackle or if he's just going to be a long-term guard for you. He improved significantly as a pass blocker his 3 years at Alabama. 2 sacks in his last season at Bama, 17 pressures and only 2 penalties. He will build a first-round pick. Finn will go through the team targets in a second, but I think he goes in that kind of row of between 10 and maybe like 25 at the worst. There's too much pedigree there. NFL comp, J.C. Latham, Mekhi Becton. The bad side could be Evan Neal. Like at worst, he could be Evan Neal. I think the positive outlook is he's a Mekhi Becton. You try him at tackle, it doesn't work. He can kick in the guard, um, and have a long, productive NFL career there.
I don't know. I hear Mekhi Becton, former
I
Jets
know,
first round pick, and I'm like,
I
oh
know.
boy.
You're having nightmares.
If this guy's Mekhi Becton, I might want to stay away from him.
Hey, but
Um,
in defense to Mekhi Becton, he has carved out a good second part of his NFL career.
He's made it work as a guard. I don't even know if he's on a team right now because he was only with the Chargers
Question.
for a season. I don't know if he's still in free agent. I don't know. He was an interesting guy, Mekhi Becton. But yeah, as far as team fits for Caden Proctor, I have Miami again. A lot of the same teams here. Miami at 11, the Rams at 13, the Lions at 17. I also saw that he actually had a top 30 visit with the Kansas City Chiefs. So I don't know if he's going to be a pick at 9, but maybe, right? The Chiefs also have the
Yeah.
29th pick, which they got in the Trent McDuffie trade from the Rams. Maybe that's a spot if Proctor falls to the later first round. Maybe this might be a spot that might be a spot at 29 where maybe the Chiefs decide to grab him. And then again, I'm echoing a lot of the other teams that we've already mentioned in here. Teams like the Eagles, maybe a guy that could eventually be a replacement for Lane Johnson, and then a team like the Cleveland Browns, who are still working on rebuilding their offensive line fully. Caden Proctor might fit in there as well for Cleveland. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that. I think if the Chiefs want him, they're going to have to move up from 29. Like I still think I think the position flex is going to help him a lot. We're going to talk about 3 more tackles, and of those 3 more, I think Proctor, because of the position flex, will probably go before all of them. But you never know. You know, it's all eye in the beholder with these guys.
All right, let's get to the next guy on our list. Caleb Lomu. So Caleb Lomu, who was the opposite tackle starter for Spencer Fano at the University of Utah. So Caleb Lomu, 6'6", 310 pounds, was a redshirt sophomore, spent 3 seasons at Utah playing opposite of Fano, like I said. In 2023, as a freshman, it was basically a developmental year for him. And then in 2024, he took over as a full-time starter at left tackle, and he earned freshman All-American honors. And in 2025, he solidified himself really as an elite left tackle, finishing the season with an 82.1 PFF pass blocking grade, which ranked 30th nationally. And he was also a first team all Big 12 selection. So everywhere I've seen from Caleb Lomu, looking like he's going to be a mid to late first round pick. So Tom, his strengths, his weaknesses, and what a potential outlook could be for him.
Yeah, started since his freshman year with plenty of experience at Utah. Utah had the most experience on the offensive line of any team in the country this year, in part because of Lomu and Fanu. Great athlete for his size, moves well, can get to the second level if needed. Really comfortable combo blocking, something that he needed to do within Utah's system this year, and he did it really well, as did Fanu. As a blocker, he shows good technique. He can get his hands where he needs where they need to go. Shows good strength. If he gets driven back, he re-anchors really well. Struggles with footwork, which impacts his ability to engage. At times, he just doesn't have the reaction time to deal with rushers' second moves. It looks like his feet get caught in cement. He just doesn't have that quickness to get side to side. There's also hesitation to his engagement at times, which leads to rushers kind of dictating the battle and taking advantage of it. Just want him to be a bit more assertive off the snap. There are times he'll drop back or kick out, and then he just kind of waits for the lineman, just get into him, just engage them right away. When he engages guys, he wins. It's just a matter of when he gives the rusher more time to make a decision or use their athleticism against them. He's just not that type of athlete. Both those issues are things I think can be corrected. And again, because he has the athletic ability to be that type of blocker. He was incredibly productive as a starter. He gave up 2 sacks and 25 pressures in 2 years, 5 penalties in 2 years as a starter. So there's a pedigree there. He tested really well in the combine as well. I think he's likely a back end of the first round, early day 2 pick. And I think he's an upside guy. I think you're drafting him and you're hoping that he can develop into a consistent starter. If you have a guy in place, you know, maybe he can sit for a year or 2 before he has to. But if you're taking him in the first round, you're probably going to want him to play a little. And then there's going to have to be patience with him as a tackle. My NFL comp is Walker Little, like a guy who was drafted, needed some time to develop, and then developed into a fine starter in the NFL. I think that's what Caleb Lomu can be.
Yeah, all my comps here, or excuse me, all my team fits here for Lomu are all basically later first round picks here, right? So Cleveland at 24, maybe. We mentioned the 49ers earlier at 27. The Chiefs at 29. I think right if they're sniffing around left tackles, they brought in Caden Proctor for a visit. Maybe they would consider Lomu here at number 29. I have the Patriots here at 32. If they wanted to kick Will Campbell in and play him at left guard, maybe Lomu can play left tackle. And you would just slide everybody down. Then you'd also have Jared Wilson. Then you kick him into the center, so you can slide the Patriot offensive line from left to right a little bit there. But yeah, I think late first round, and then as we get into the early parts of the second round, right? Arizona picking at 34. If they decide not to go offensive line, if they go somewhere else, maybe Lomo becomes their pick. The Raiders, from everything I've heard, they're looking at offensive linemen, right? They're going to take Mendoza at 1, but then they're picking, I think it's at 35 or 36. And then the Titans are up there too. The Titans could use some offensive line help in front of Cam Ward. So it's looking like if he doesn't get out of, if he isn't a first round pick, early day 2 is likely where we'll see this guy going, as we have a bunch of teams all basically lined up together and they all have needs on the offensive line.
I think of these last three guys and Proctor's in this category too, although I think he'll go a little sooner. I wouldn't be shocked if these last three guys we talk about, Lomu included, go at the back half of the first, because all those teams you just listed, they need tackles. They need guys that can come in. And I think putting a Lomu or some of these other guys that we're going to talk to in some of these situations would be perfect for him. And there is a world where these guys look at Lomu and go, he can develop into what Mauigoa is now or better. Or he could potentially be better than some of these guys at the top end of the draft. So I think if you need a tackle at the back end of this first round, you'll be happy with any of these next couple guys we're going to talk about, because they can develop into starting offensive tackles, even if they'll start for you next year. And I might not consider them starting ready. In a year or two, they will be.
All right, the next guy on our list. Here's another one for me to pronunciate. Max Nacho. That's, I believe, how you pronounce that. So our buddy Max here, 6'6", 330 pounds, out of Arizona State. So he's an interesting story. So he was originally born in Nigeria, moved to the United States at the age of 13, and never played a snap of high school football. So when he gets to the States, right, he gets a little older. He enrolls at East Los Angeles College, which is a JUCO. So that's where he was in 2021. And he transfers to Arizona State in 2023, and by 2024, he's their full-time left tackle. In 2025, he earned second-team Big 12 honors and allowed 0 sacks from September 2024 throughout the end of his college career, which is very, very impressive. And he was part of that Arizona State team, if you recall, who made a run to the college football playoff back in 2024. Very surprising run. So speaking of running, right, he actually had a very good combine as well. He tied Spencer Fano for the fastest 40 at the combine among linemen at 4.91. Right now, all my projections that I've seen, he could be a late first to early second round pick. So our guy here, Tom, Max Nacho, strengths, weaknesses, and your outlook for him.
Yeah, Max Ihanacher. Still developing as a prospect. He only started playing in 2021. He's a former soccer player. Good athlete, really good footwork for a kid who's only been playing this sport for 5 years, really 4. That footwork probably comes from the sport he played before. Slides well, kicks out really well. Does have issues with getting his hands on super bendy guys. They dip below his pad level, and he really struggles to get hold of them. This leads to him grabbing across the chest, which got him flagged a little bit. I'll talk about that in a second. If he can find a way to just add a little bit more quickness, which I think he can, because he shows that he's a good athlete. If he can just get a little bit quicker, post kick out, he should be able to cover himself off against these guys, and then he'll be really difficult to beat in pass rushing situations. Gets off the snap with good speed and quickness. He has good hands once he gets engaged. Solid run blocker, shows good technique and power when being asked to just get his hands on guys and drive them forward, but he needs to become stronger as a blocker. He shows good initial strength. He re-anchors well, but he gets driven back way too easily. Shows good balance, but when he gets blown off the snap, he really struggles to maintain his balance. Struggled to pick up blitzers and stunters. It was mostly blitzers. But again, he's a young offensive lineman in terms of playing years, so this is something that he can develop. Despite those concerns, Finn mentioned it, 0 sacks in 3 years with Arizona State, but he did have a ton of penalties. He had 16 penalties in 3 years. He had 8 last year. He's very much a work in progress. For as much good as there is when you flip this film on, he still looks incredibly raw as a pass blocker. So because of that, if you draft him and start him this year, there has to be a level of patience. I'm really hoping he ends up in a situation where he isn't asked to start this year. I'd like for him to have another year to develop, and with pro coaching and maybe some older linemen around him to help mentor him. I think there's a world where he becomes a pretty consistent starter. My NFL comp for him is Titus Howard, who's a guy who took a little bit of time before he became a starter in Houston, and then has been a starter the last 3 or 4 years before being traded this year. And he's been a competent tackle for them. And I think for Ian Archer, that's what he can be in the NFL. I just worry about if he gets kind of thrown to the wolves too early, if that stunts his development and forces him to develop some bad habits.
Yeah, so team fits for me for our guy Max. The 49ers again at 27. One team I haven't mentioned yet today, Houston Texans at 28. Mentioned Titus Howard, right? They traded him to Cleveland about a couple weeks ago now during free agency. They have an opening kind of at that left tackle position right now, right? They still have Trent Brown on the roster. They got guys like Ed Ingram on the inside, Jared Patterson, but they don't really have a left tackle right now. You know, he could slide into left tackle, but as you mentioned, right, it's going to be a little bit of a transition period for him. You know, he's going to have his warts from day one if he's asked to be a day one starter there. And I'll echo New England at 31. And then as we get into the second round here, I have Arizona here at number 33. Again, this is if they choose not to pick an offensive lineman at 3. Maybe they take Arvell Reese or David Bailey instead. And then at 33, at 34, they come back around and try to take the offensive lineman at that spot. And then again, actually Houston, right, they're picking at 28. They also have a pick at 38. So a little early here in the second round. Maybe Inacho could go at that position, and I don't know. I think overall on the board, I don't see him as a guy really falling into the mid second round. I think he'll be more towards the earlier, maybe at least the first 10 picks of the
If
second
if
round.
if he makes it to Houston at 38, I think they take him. I think
Yeah.
they take him potentially at 28. I think you bring them up with Titus Howard is exactly what we were just talking about. They've already had that type of lineman and that type of project, and they developed him into a solid starter. And you can argue this is a kid who's been playing this sport for 4 years. His upside might be a little higher than what Howard's was. So yeah, I think there are a lot of teams in this back half that are going to be willing to take these projects and put them in on lines that are at least good enough that a lot of these teams were playoff teams last year. So let's insert a piece. Let's get him good coaching. We can be a little bit patient with him. We can give him help if we need to. But again, if this is a guy who can develop and clean up some of the stuff he struggles with, we're talking about a starting tackle in the NFL that you're getting in the back end of the first. You'll take that any day of the week.
All right. This is the last name on our list. I like this name, Tom. Blake Miller.
Easy.
Nice and easy. So Blake Miller out of Clemson, 6'6", 315 pounds, coming off his senior season. So 4 years, he started every game of his college career, all 4 seasons, 54 consecutive games from 2022 to 2025. He actually broke the Clemson record for career snaps from scrimmage, playing over like 3,700 snaps. He was a two-time first-team All-ACC selection in 2024 and 2025. And in 2025, he only allowed 2 sacks and over 800 plus snaps. Pretty impressive. For our guy, Blake Miller, projected late first round to early second round. So strengths, weaknesses, and your outlook for Mr. Miller.
Yeah, so again, just bear with me. He is the last guy I watched, so my notes aren't in the order I have them for the other ones. But I enjoyed watching Blake Miller. He slides and moves really well. He's comfortable as a pass blocker, shows really good technique as a pass blocker, doesn't lose a lot of one-on-one battles. He's a good athlete for his size. He moves well, has good strength, gets off the ball and kicks out really well. He's more comfortable blocking down the line as a run blocker than just straight up as a run blocker, and is athletic enough to get out in space and block for screenplays. He understands picking up stunts, but he's a bit slow doing it. Can get a bit too hunched over when he's asked to run block. I think he really struggles as a run blocker. He struggles to engage. It impacts his balance. He has bad hand placement as a run blocker. He does more pushing than engaging. He ends up on the ground way more than what I would like to see for him. In terms of Sacks, he didn't give up many sacks. He gave up 8 sacks over the course of his 4 years at Clemson, only 2 his senior year, but he was flagged a lot. He had 22 penalties. Now, again, he's played since his freshman year, but he had 5 in 2025, which is still more than the majority of the teams that we've had here. Luke Goddard is a comparison that I've seen in terms of a good pass blocker can struggle as a run blocker. I think this kid can come in day one and be a really good pass blocker for your NFL team, but you're going to have to live with the warts of his struggles as a run blocker. I've seen his name more than some of the other names, which is why Finn and I kind of threw him in last year. I think if you're a team that throws the ball more than you run it, this guy will be way more intriguing to you than some of these other guys, because I think he's an NFL pass blocker now. And me personally, and again, if there are any offensive line coaches that want to reach out to me and tell me otherwise, I'm open to it. But I like to think it's easier to become a better run blocker than it is a pass blocker. If you already have a good base of pass blocking, I'm more comfortable taking that and saying, I will develop you, or my coaches will develop you as a run blocker. And that's what Blake Miller is. So if he can just become a bit more steady as a run blocker, we're talking about a guy that's up there in that higher crop of tackles because of how good of a pass blocker he is now and because of how much he's played. He has a ton of experience, but the run blocking is a concern right now, which is why still, Finn's going to break down some team fits here, which is why he's still not a guaranteed first round pick, even if I think he does end up somewhere in the 20s.
Yeah, the earliest I had him potentially going here was maybe Detroit at 17, just because
Yeah.
they're kind of desperate for tackle help right now. But
Yep.
outside of that, the 49ers at 27, Houston, we were just talking about at 28, the Patriots at 31. And then as we get into the second round here, so you got like I said, a bunch of teams here need offensive line help. Arizona is picking at number 34. Again, if they go defense with their pick number 3 at 34, they might be open for business here for the offensive line spot. You've also got the Raiders in the mix there. I know they have some players still in their offensive line who they like Colton Miller and Jackson Powers Johnson, but I think he could be a really good help for Fernando Mendoza, right? Coming into, or well,
Kirk
I don't know
Cousins.
now. Kirk Cousins is going to be the
Kirk
starter now.
Cousins.
Apparently, he just signed the other day, so maybe instead Kirk Cousins will take the beatings while Mendoza sits on the bench for a little while to get ready. And then of course, right, you got Tennessee up there too. Maybe the Titans might want to put somebody else in front of Cam Ward. I think they could use some tackle help. I think I actually just saw Evan Neal as like their right tackle, so that might be a little earning, I think. So, yeah, who is on the Titans here? I want to make sure I get it. Oh, JC Latham. That's who I was thinking. I'm not Evan
Yeah,
Neal.
who's
The
who's
other
a former first round pick.
another guy from Bama who I was thinking about. But yeah, so JC Latham is there, but really a left tackle, they don't really have much right there right now. The Dan Moore, I think they signed him to a big contract. I don't know what they really think of him with the new right Dayball's there now. So and then outside of that, right, Houston again coming around at 38. If our guy Max isn't there, maybe they'll pick up Blake Miller at 38. Or if not, then maybe teams are concerned about the run blocking and maybe he slips a little bit to the mid-second round.
Yeah, I just think one of these teams in the back half of the first round that like to throw the ball a lot, whether it's the Niners, whether it's somebody else, they'll take a flyer on this kid and figure the run blocking stuff out later. If not, I think he'd be a great pick for some of these teams in the early second round, especially because there's going to be a lot less pressure on him to just come in and play football. But again, really sound pass blocker for what he is now. Don't be shocked if he goes higher than what you might expect, especially if he's a name you haven't heard a lot of. I feel like in the last month and a half, his name's cropped up a lot more. And when you watch his film, it's easy to see why, especially with where he's at as a pass blocker.
All right, Tom, let's close with this. Let's talk about the best of the rest. Are there any other I know we covered tackles a lot here, but are there any other offensive linemen that we did not cover here that our audience should be familiar with? Whether maybe if it's a guard or even a center. We didn't talk centers at all. Uh,
Yeah, I think centers we're talking about end of second round, early third round, and really the only two I think are Jake Slaughter from Florida and Trey Zahn, the third from A&M. I haven't watched either one of those guys. They're projected or like just inside that top 100 by Dane Brugler. And then when it comes to guards, Chase Basantis played at A&M. I think he's going to be a serviceable starting guard for NFL teams. He might struggle next year, but he's a guy who played quite a bit at A&M. Emmanuel Pregnon from Oregon was another guy who has some experience, a redshirt senior, good solid guard who can come in and just be a capable guard for you. And then there's Jennings Dunker from Iowa. He's the one with the crazy long hair and the
Right.
mustache. I'm sure he will likely be a second day selection. I won't be shocked if he's there and gets quite some TV time. But Iowa's a place that produces really sound offensive linemen. So don't be shocked if your team takes him on day 2 somewhere if he comes in and he's competing for a starting spot day 1.
Yeah, Tristan Wirfs comes to mind from Iowa, and, you know who the Jets took instead of Tristan Wirfs, Tom?
No,
Mekhi
who?
Becton. So, there you go, that didn't work out. So, we
I mean,
came right back around to Mekhi
it
Becton
worked
there.
out for the Eagles. It just didn't work out
Oh,
for you
yeah, of
guys.
course, everything works out for the Eagles.
Yeah, unfortunately.
All right, folks, thanks for hanging in the Loft with us. The official Loft Sports podcast can be found wherever you consume your podcasts. Check out our website at loftsportus.com. We continue to add scouting reports for the draft. Tom's continuing to work on those. Please check out our articles, rate and review our articles. Please let us know how we're doing. Feedback is very important to us so that we know if we're doing something right, maybe we're doing something wrong, maybe we don't know what the hell we're doing. Let us know. So our NFL draft series is going to continue on Tuesday when we break down the top defensive linemen in the draft. So we'll go discuss the edges, we'll discuss the defensive tackles, we'll go through all those guys. We're also going to release a pod recapping the national championship game, right? Probably after it goes final on Monday night, depending on, how the game's looking. Maybe we'll come on a little early if there's a blowout or not. If Michigan or Arizona are really giving it to Illinois or UConn, which is kind of what I'm expecting to happen, honestly, right now. Follow Loft Sports on X, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram. Follow us on all 5 social platforms. We are under Loft Sports USA. Please rate and review us on whichever platform you listen to your podcasts. Thanks everyone for listening. We will talk to you soon.